Okay, if I could call the meeting to order, please. Welcome everyone to this small and special meeting of the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee. If I could invite you to join me in our opening karakia, please. Tākana te marama kia tātou, tākana te araha kia tātou, tākana te rangamārie kia tātou, ko Parongia me te kawa, ko mga tautari, ko kakapuku ngā monga, ko Waikato, ko Waipa, ngā awa, te hei muriora. All right, thank you everyone. Now, this is our first formal meeting since being in a state of emergency. So I am going to ask Mike Pettit to make some comments in that respect.
Right, thank you, Chair Monty. Right, so here we go. Look, hey, first of all, so state of emergency was declared on Saturday around 3 p.m. It was declared across the entire district, and the reason for that is rather than just go the western side of a district is so we could pull any resources under that state of emergency from anywhere within the district. So that was what we did. There's 12 steps that you have to consider to declare a state of emergency, of which I was satisfied that they were definitely met. So then things, I guess, swung into action, and an EOC, an emergency organisation centre, was set up in Otorohanga. It was actually already set up, so we've joined in with them. So that's where the sort of headquarters, so to speak, is actually managed out of. So all official information comes out of the EOC. All the resources in there at this stage, it's manned or people 24 hours a day. And it's sort of like a logistics room with all groups of people all reporting back multiple times a day. So just back to, I'll talk now more about Waipa, and we are talking really very isolated areas. This was an isolated weather event through parts of our district, and other parts were not affected at all. So I understand that people will have different encounters over the last week of what hasn't happened, but those people that were in the wake of the storm, they very much have been affected. So some of the main areas affected, and this is not to demean other areas that haven't been affected, but Whatauri Road, we've had several residents up there in isolation, sort of farming community. And so what's happening there is the road's been washed out, a big culvert's been washed out, and there's remediation is happening there. It started a couple of days ago. So I don't know the state of play right now, but they're putting in vehicle access for a start, and then that vehicle access will be re-engineered to then hopefully allow for tanker access. So that's what's attempting to be happening up there, but we dropped into those residents and they're very happy to see us and they're looking after each other, so well done there. Mangati, so though it's not in our area, a lot of the people that live at the top of that road have a lot to do with our area, particularly the Longyear village. And so we did drop in there and talk to a farmer up there. And again, those people are isolated, but a temporary road was going in there a couple of days ago. So they had access, I think, from yesterday morning is what the intent was. But again, they're looking after each other. We go to go to Corcoran Road. So there's been some severe damage there to approximately 20 houses or sets of residents above the damage, and it's a culvert about 3.5 meters wide that is totally blocked. I've seen a bit of drone footage of that, and so the last few days there has been contractors up there, and they're getting the water out as we speak. 3 big pumps up there, for instance. There's machinery up there. Getting the water out will be the first part of it, but then they're going to get down to the rocks, logs, and silt. So I don't know the time frame on that, but I acknowledge there are people out of their houses for safety reasons. I acknowledge it is difficult, but in every respect across the district, we're putting safety first. So just bear with us that we're doing the right thing at the right reason in as timely fashion as we can. Titahi Wea, which is, so that sort of effectively that piece of infrastructure is linked to feeding potable water to the people of Polonia. So there's been significant damage up there. There's a storage dam that is being emptied at present, right as of this minute. I'll get another situation report at 10 o'clock, but once the water is cleared from there, then at least that will be safer because there's been damage to the side of that storage dam, the weir above it, and all that infrastructure that feeds into that dam is effectively gone. It isn't there anymore, and there'll be significant pipe damage before and after those storage ponds that lead to the treatment plant. The treatment plant itself is intact, but has also significant damage just through all the silt that went through it. So, I'm not sure of the state of play of the actual treatment plant, but there's alternates in place for people of Polonia. And at this stage, they are working. And that's largely thanks to the people of Polonia and the water restrictions that they are adhering to. So there's some temporary fixes that will alleviate that, and that will be announced when it's going to be announced, but soon. And then a longer term solution will be discussed. Look, apart from that, there is damages to bridges on State Highway 39, again out of our district, but I know it affects our district because it'll divert traffic. Look, I know where there was traffic running through towns, and Polonia would be one, there will be possibly less people going through there. So, if there's a time to shop local and think about trying to keep businesses going, it would be good that people across the district think about those sorts of things. Farmers and resilience. There is being milk being spilt across the district simply because tangas can't get in there. So that whole animal welfare piece as well has been looked at in the rural support group. I think meet daily, and so farmers, that's a really good first port of call. But of course, civil defence and our comms through council, other places that you will get information. There's a mural relief fund that's been stood up, and I've just signed off another piece of documentation to get that actually physically up and running. So that will be imminent. And again, look for how to access that, what it's accessed for, but it's really that day-to-day stuff to help folks out. The council a couple of days ago, chaired by Deputy Mayor Joe Davis-Colley, stood up the fund, and the council will be putting money into that, or has, and the ministry or the government will be, and then anyone else out there who wishes to feed into this fund, it would be greatly appreciated. It is needed. The fund will sit there after this event for any possible future events, so it will be stood up for sort of ever and a day. Look, there is discussion around setting up some welfare centres. So that's really to access as part of the recovery. So more information will come out around that. And looking at standing one up in the Otorohanga district and one up in the Waipa district, obviously somewhere over this side of the district. And I just want to finish up with, straight away when this event happened, it was so quick that, look, our staff, our contractors, all the emergency services, everyone, and many people were involved as a really rapid response. So look, thank you to all those, the emergency services and what you folks have had to deal with. And of course, we've also had a loss of life, which is the ultimate worst case scenario. And we have made contact with the family there. I'd just like to pay just thanks to Joe Davis-Colley, Deputy Mayor. Being in a car by yourself and trying to get everything done would actually be impossible. There'll be a debrief of a whole lot of learnings around this, and I've definitely been taking notes of my own learnings. But just personally, thanks to Joe for being there, and just actually so we can get stuff done while still trying to get to places. So thank you for that, Joe. Look, that's just a brief overview, but it still remains on keeping safe with his road cones. There's a reason for it, This time, adhere to the road cones. They are there to keep people safe. Roads are opening up, so keep an eye on the websites as they open. They are coming off those sites, so it's a changing feast day to day, hour to hour. So it's really a bit of an overview, Monty.
Thank you, Mayor Mike. And I'm sure you'll keep us updated as this situation progresses. Okay, now if we can turn our attention to the rest of the agenda. Apologies, we don't have any, except Mayor Mike has already indicated he has a briefing at 10 o'clock, so he will potentially be leaving just before the end of our meeting for that. So can we note that, please? Oh, you want a resolution for that? Okay, I'll move. Joe Davies' colleague will second that to note that potential apology if it comes to fruition. Disclosure of members' interests. I don't believe there would be any for this simple agenda. No one's got anything else to say about that. Right, we'll move past that. And then into the substantive item here, which is the submissions on central government reforms. The simplifying local government and the development levies. I'll invite Katie Mays to come and speak to us about this.
Tēnā koutou. So we have two submissions today. Both of these have been discussed previously in the council workshop. The first of these is around simplifying local government. The submission is due on Friday. And as it notes in the report, what you've got hopefully reflects the feedback that you provided to us at the workshop and takes into account the direction of travel of the submissions of Local Government New Zealand and Taitawara in particular. And then the second one, when we spoke at the workshop, this was, we had expected that we would have received the final submission of the National Working Group around development levies. They're still finalising that submission at the moment, so I haven't been able to provide it to you. We have Tony Coots here who can answer questions about it. Tony assures us that the submission continues on track as it was, as we discussed in the workshop, and that he's been able to take the feedback and guidance that you gave at that workshop to make sure that that's reflected. And so what the recommendation talks about here in the submission is actually that we seek that significant weight is placed on the submission, but we're not asking you to endorse a submission that you haven't seen, obviously, but hopefully that gets the right weight for the technical comments that the National Working Group can make. So that's the overview of the two submissions. The last thing before I stop was the first thing that I was asked to say, and that was just about the recommendations, that the final recommendation about delegating authority to Steph O'Sullivan to make any minor amendments. Obviously, we've got Kirsty in that seat today, so the recommendation would be that it's to Kirsty Downey as Acting Deputy Chief Exec. But really happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, it should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, I suggest we probably do these sequentially. So if we could just start with the simplifying local government one. Does anyone have questions or comments they'd like to make? Claire.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Just compliments to the author of the report. I thought it was really well put together, and I could see that the feedback that was given at the workshop was incorporated, which was really, really good to see. I just thought there's just a few tweaks that could emphasise a few things. Like I'm looking at paragraph 21, which I think is on page 17 of our agenda. It's talking about the timeframes, which I think is a really good point to press home, actually, because there's such misalignment, and trying to work in with the government reform program while we've still got all our obligations and those other cycles, you know, that we need to be on top of for our budgeting and that. I think that first bullet point talks about the operating environment could shift as early 2027. And I'd quite like something added like, whereas early budgets and business plans need to be in preparation well before mid-2026 or something. Yeah, because the people that are reading this don't appreciate those long lead-in times that we need. Yeah, things like that. And the other comment I wanted to make is that when I read the briefing document or the consultation document, there was a pretty clear direction to indicate for the Crown representation, what sort of voting rights they should have. And there's in the submission, it says that definitely want to have Crown representation. And the mayoral forum letter says that they should have voting rights similar to the other members. And so I just think we should actually say what our stance is. Do we support that? I mean, I think that's good. I wouldn't want them to have veto rights. I don't want them to have no voting rights at all. Yeah, so I just thought it would be helpful if we actually put a stick in the ground and say, yeah, we do want them there and we do want them to have a voting right. I recall the discussion. I think Mayor Mike, you said you didn't want them to have an override. It was important for them to have a vote, yeah, but not to override all the others around the table as well. Yeah. Anyway, so those are my suggestions. Thanks.
Yeah, look, happy to, if that's supported, we're happy to. I mean, Haven's making notes, which is why I'm kind of making eye contact over here, and we can certainly add those points, both, like you say, to the first paragraph and then into paragraph 15, where we already talk about Crown representatives.
Okay, and just on that specific point, does anyone want to have a contrary view? I don't think it's especially controversial. It's a good point. We did discuss it in the workshops. So yeah, I think you can incorporate something to that effect in there. This is fairly early in this discussion. It's only a discussion paper. We're not actually submitting on legislation or anything. So so it can be relatively high level, our comments. Yeah. Okay, Ion, you're next.
Yeah, a couple, and I second Claire's comments that, yeah, really well-written paper overall, and actually, honestly, I'd be happy if it went as it is, but just offering a couple of thoughts. With the transitional support, I think we should probably make it clear that the costs of that, we shouldn't just be accepted to pull into our baseline rates unless it's made explicit ahead of time, because there will be a cost impact, and that should be very transparent. And then a second point on the sort of overall program approach, following up on that one really, which is that I think we should make it very clear the costs that are associated in terms of governance changes and transition and so on and so forth. So you know where this is going to go, right? I mean, it's a reform, so people are going to think, great, it's a reform, so it's going to cost less. Ultimately, yes, but there will be a cost to make these changes. So therefore, I think it's just important that we make it clear that as a whole, we don't just suck that up, and it's made very clear to people ahead of time that there's a cost to making these changes that will come in the near term. That's it.
We can certainly do that, and I think actually referencing the Auckland Council example would be a really good one, where there is evidence now, and they've just done their 10-year sort of lessons learned around what the costs are of amalgamation, and it may not be that that's the form that this restructure takes, but the point is still valid. It still takes a lot more, and even the sort of boring costs about ensuring you've got the same IT systems, and yeah, I mean the same rates billing systems, even obvious things like that, as well as the governance costs. Yeah.
Okay, costs are dealt with in clause 20, paragraph 20. Do you want to ramp it up a little?
A little bit, yeah. I haven't got precise word. I can offer some precise
no,
if you want, but just something that makes it clear that we make it very obvious that that it doesn't come for free, any of this stuff, and that should be across the piece, not just Waipa. Everyone should report that.
Great. No, let's avoid wordsmithing here, but as a instruction of emphasis, I think that's great. Okay, Les, I think you were next. You had your hand up.
Just a question regarding the levies. Is there any information on what we're going to be asked to put these levies on, i.e. private water take?
Oh, sorry, Les, that's the levies, you're talking development levies. Can we just park that? We'll do, I'm trying to do this in two parts. That's the second submission. We'll come back to you. You'll be first question on when we get to development levies. Roger, are you on simplifying local government?
Yes, I
Yep,
do.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
lovely. Thank you. And just a few points, and some of them are endorsements of what has already been said. But my first thought about this, I think that some reorganisation of governance is inevitable, and it's going to come. And certainly where form follows function, so the work has got to be done in that regard. And it should extend to the wider Waikato context, recognising the integrated growth and infrastructure patterns that we have. As we know, eventually, Three Waters will be Waikato-wide, even though we're starting off with two entities, but it eventually will be Waikato-wide. So to me, it's a bit logic that other governments should follow a similar pattern. Agree totally with the consideration of strengthening of shared services. That appears logical to me. And of course, we have got a very strong shared entity collab, which is already there and functioning in that arena. Going back to this proposal, I think that there must be recognition that there should be some strength in local entities and a voice for local entities to whatever the future governance structure looks like. And that to a degree, they've got to have some funding and some finance allocated to that local voice. I think we've got to be careful that the metropolitan entity, let's call it Hamilton City, doesn't dominate. And obviously, if we're looking at a voting structure that is dependent upon population, then there's a chance that that could occur. I'm going to suggest that as we have with our Waikato Waters, there is a dual voting methodology whereby the voting can be on a population majority, but also that it's on the member entity majority, so that in a case of important decisions, you make sure that it's that each entity has got a voice. So I'd like to see somehow that being incorporated within our submission, that there should be some dual voting methodology introduced. And totally agree. I think there's got to be some provision of the transitional financial support to this process, because it should not fall back on the ratepayer. So that would be a kind of a line one for me in terms of adding to our submission that transitional funding is identified and provided so that this can proceed. So thank you.
Okay,
Those are my points.
Thanks, Roger. I'll just going to provide a few comments from myself. When I read, I don't disagree with anything in our submission. I think it's really well written, well done to the staff. So my comments are kind of bigger picture with respect to the reorganisation of governance in the Waikato region. And yeah, this appears to me as a real opportunity to shape our own destiny, and the challenges for the mayors on the TCB to grab hold of that and do it. It's we're always complaining about the fact we're always being told what to do by government. Here's a golden opportunity to come up with a plan that is evidence-based, that's rational, that makes sense. And when you read this, you do think, well, the government, if we can come up with something, we might get a go on this. So, Mayor Mike, I know you're very busy, but this is going to be a very big piece of work, and we will be right behind you on this, because it is pretty clear to me that the Waikato could be governed better, and it could unlock a lot of potential in our wider region if we get this right. The trick will be unlocking that sort of potential while at the same time maintaining the best of localism. Okay, so that's sort of what we've got to be shooting for, I think. It's going to be quite a challenge, but well, my challenge to the mayors, you and your colleagues, Mike, is that you grab hold of this and really make this opportunity count, because it could set us the region on a really good path. So that's what I think. Okay, Mike, are you wanting to respond to that before then I'll take us through the resolutions?
Taking a lot of choice, Monty, I really need to. But it'll be pretty brief. Hey, I think effectively what we're looking for is some brave leadership across the region. And with, brave leadership can be difficult, because to build something better, you often have to let go of some things. But it's also protecting what's important. And hey, what's important to people, I guess, at a democratic level is we have a voice around whatever is going to be built. So that's been taken on, but how we do that will be the brave bit. And then, amalgamation and all those sorts of things is one aspect that I'm sure, yes, will be put on the table and different ways of doing that. But there'll be different scenarios put on the table. Each will have their benefits and each will have their negatives. And the shared service piece, there's a whole lot of work that I would expect to be brought to the table for us to look at around efficiencies. But I also pick up on, in the end, we will build a better system, whatever that is. The ball is in our court. The government have given us the rope to either make some good decisions if we're brave enough, or have things done to us which we don't want. So you're better to be in control of your own destiny. So look, the mayors are up to it, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to be some give and take around that table, and looking after your district over yourself, I think, is the key thing here.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Mike. Last question on this, or comment, Dale Marie, and then we'll go to the resolutions, please.
Ngā koe Monty. And I'm just going to support a lot of the themes that I see within the Hamilton City one around our partnership with iwi. And that they're not forgotten in this space, because as we went through the unfair referendum where other people got to decide the home people's voice, that was taken away off this table. I support the comments, I support everything that's going into our submission, but I also support making sure that we recognise iwi partnerships within it. Tēnā tātou.
Thanks, Dale Marie. And Shane, you just beat the buzzer, so I'll make you the last question on this.
Okay, so I think overall the submission's very good. I certainly agree with Roger. I don't think we've emphasised enough the importance of the local voice and making sure that's not lost. So I think that's an area that we can build. I see in the government's proposition, it says that one of the criteria is that local has its say, but how that is going to be done is going to be very challenging. And I just think we need to emphasise it a little bit more in our submission, make it a little bit stronger. And just one other comment was, I noticed in the minister's forward that he talks about no wonder over half of New Zealanders don't vote in local elections because of the confusion. And I do note that in Australia, it's actually compulsory to vote. They see it as a duty to vote in local, except for two states, Western Australia, Southern Australia, and they're thinking about, because of their low uptake of votes, of bringing that in as a compulsory as well. So I think that's something that is an interesting point that we need to think about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Okay, Katie, do you want to respond? Yes.
Could I just pick up on this, just to point out to you that we've included the consultation document in Appendix 3, and on page 50 of your agenda, just to pick up on particularly this point about voting rights around the Combined Territories Board, just to remind people that there's a two-step approach here. So the community, the members obviously need to represent more than 50% of the population that support the resolution, which obviously then means that it won't go through unless Hamilton City in this case actually approves, and more than 50% of the members approve the resolution, which means that you get this rural-urban balance, and that's certainly been catered for. And I suggest that we just make it explicit that we support that approach, but that's certainly what's envisaged by government, and we'll beef up the commentary about the end result as well.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Now, I've been under a slight misunderstanding. The resolutions relate to both these submissions, so apologies. So if we can now, we'll turn our attention to the development levy one. And Les, you had the first question on this. Go ahead.
Do we have any idea, or are we going to have any input on what these levies are to be applied to, i.e. water? We all know the concern of the public around the use of water over the years.
Just ask Tony to come up to the table so that everyone will be able to hear the response online as well, as he's best placed to answer probably all the questions you're going to have.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And through the chair, so essentially we'll be able to set what the levies are, and the levies will be very similar to a contribution. It will be a charge made based on the demand that you generate. So if you are connecting to our water supplies, we'll be able to fairly charge you through either connection application, a subdivision consent, building consent, or land use. If you are providing your own water on site, you wouldn't be charged for that specific charge.
So will there be, like for farming, are there going to be levies on the use of water by farming?
If they are, through the chair, if they have their own water supply, they would not be charged. So if they were coming through through the likes of our Pukeremu scheme, where their connection can be made to our network, they would be charged based on what our levy sets are. That might change under Waikato Waters with regards to how those levies are set up in the future, but there will still have to be a nexus of what you're connecting to, what you're generating an impact on the infrastructure will be what your charge is. And if you aren't generating a charge, say you're getting your own water take or fresh water take, etc., there shouldn't be a charge associated with the growth costs.
If a water pipe goes past your property, will you be required to connect to it?
You will not be required to connect to it.
Pip. In sort of in the submission, point number 6 in the preamble, it talked about, Waipawa has operated a development contribution policy since 2009. Were further contributions received of 74 million and approximately 78 million currently outstanding against existing applications. And yet, in the October 4 monthly accounts, we have something like $220 million worth of debt, of which most of that is related to development contributions. Can you reconcile those two numbers for me?
Sure. So the 70 odd million that has been recovered has been based on policies and the capital expenditure that you had in former LTPs. So it's been since 2009 what you've already planned for and invested in and recouped. The current outstanding 80 odd million is around what you have still planned to recoup and what you've already charged against consents that have come through the door. The 200 million sort of additional planned infrastructure that will be on charged through the next 10 years. So it's when it comes on stream. So it's over time that gets collected through what you charge out. So what we have currently charged out is against what is on our books in terms of consents issued. And you can't charge out that additional 200 until you've received the application to make the assessment against.
It's a complicated field, this one. We'll be having growth workshops through the development of the LTP. And that'll help understanding. But certainly when I got here, it was the thing I struggled with most, understanding the funding of growth and the development contribution regime and the timing of it. So exactly the same kind of questions you've had, Pip. It just led to one for me on exactly the same paragraph. 78 million currently outstanding that are not yet certified as additional growth. What exactly are you referring to there? Is that in the submissions we make for the amount of development land we have available?
So let me just put it in there. 78 million currently outstanding against existing applications that are not yet certified. So that's essentially that they haven't come in for their certification of consent. So until that comes in, they're in a state of they could be withdrawn. They could be confirmed as in. So essentially they go against the initial consent application that gets lodged. And then once they come in for certification, we require evidence of that payment, and that's evidence of the growth occurring. So it's an initial assessment that occurs based on the policy that applies.
Cool. So we're referring to a 224 certificate there. Is that the certification of that certificate? Cool. Thank you. Brilliant. Understand. Ian.
Thanks, Mike. Monty, excuse me. I confuse my children by calling you both Mike. Anyway, once again, great, well-written paper. Thank you. I'd support it as it goes. I mean, I think, yeah, complex topic, bigger picture. I think it's still important that we don't lose fact that I think the move is a good idea. It gives us a lot more flexibility that we've been asking for. It will probably make things more expensive. That's, I don't think we should hide from that. We're spreading out cost, so therefore it gets more expensive. This is not a silver bullet. It's a better tool, but it is not a silver bullet. But I wonder, and suggestion, as I say, I'd support the paper exactly as is, but I wonder if there's an opportunity here just to, in summary at the end, say, look, say all the things we've said, but this needs to be part of a wider toolkit. It is not the only answer, and there are still a lot of unanswered questions from the government in terms of, oh yes, central government, excuse me, we're going to bring you more funding tools to help. I'd like to know what those are. And I know we're not going to get an answer, but I think it is important that we reinforce the fact that this is not the only answer to the funding challenges that we've been placed under.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for picking that up, because when we were talking just before this meeting, I said to Tony, that's one thing I should just note in the introduction, and sorry, my brain was too full and it fell out the other ear, because as you're right, this is part of the suite of funding and financing tools, which is, again, only one of the pillars of the Going for Housing Growth agenda for the government. But we have been being promised a number of tools for some time. At the moment, we've seen these very small tweaks to the infrastructure funding financing levy to try to make it easier for smaller scale projects. But that, again, as this council's discussed previously, is likely to actually have a higher financing cost rather than a lower financing cost than currently, just as this will as well. So as you say, the suite is still ending up probably costing our community more rather than less. And so making that point and looking forward to working with the government to actually develop some of those tools in a way that is going to work for our situation, I think is a really useful comment to make. Thank you.
Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've just made a couple of comments here, not as specific as the ones that have been made, but certainly support the Development Contributions Working Group. And I acknowledge, Tony, your contribution to that group. So thank you for the work that you're putting in, and also obviously strongly representing the view coming from an authority like Waipa, which is a growth but also rural. And I see advantages on the payment regime that I think you've outlined through that submission. It would seem to me that this suggested is more aimed at those authorities that don't currently have a growth paying for growth system. So that will better allow them to capture some of their costing structure into their policies. So that's good. And But as well as that, of course, it does enhance our application of those growth pays for growth principles. So I think that that's really positive. So thank you for the efforts that you're putting in there.
Dean.
Thanks, Monty. My question, I'm just to understand, and it may have been in some of the material, but a levy, would that be applied at the start of a project as opposed to recovering it later on? Is that how it works?
So the levy will be imposed based on what your planned and historic growth costs have been. So you'll be required to meet regulation standards on how you set those levies. That regulator's still yet to be set, and that bill's only half written. So we've got a lot of work to do with DIA and MHUD and MFE to help inform what that regulation should look like and the regulator that gets set up. But essentially, it will form the same time as your application is lodged. So when your application gets lodged, there's no change in that. What has changed is that the moment that application is lodged, the current bill legislation is you will start to incur interest over and above what's already been applied to the levy. So you'll be applied quarterly interest payments from when the levy gets set. That interest rate is yet to be determined. That would be the regulator's responsibility to set that interest rate. And then you will also be able to be reassessed at a new rate every 3 years from when you lodge the application. So with that comes some administrative burden on the council as well, and that goes to the cost element to this, you know, us reviewing each individual consent, retweaking them as their dates come through. We are trying to advocate that a lot of those administration costs are something that we can also recruit from developers in terms of the outgoing and incoming costs. So yes, it gets set at the time of when they can consent, and it just has more optionality for council to assure that revenue comes in. And it also gives the developers more stringent criteria for them to really focus on what's the best case for them in a cash flow perspective. Should they pay now or should they pay it later?
And if I could just add, sort of thinking about the intent of that and charging interest rather than just from a financial perspective, the idea is then that it disincentivises land banking, which is obviously what we're seeing up and down the country.
And that was exactly my next question. Well, this for the land banking situation, so it'll help us with our planning to know that once the applications are in, that really they're going to proceed, because there's a disadvantage not to. Excellent.
All right. Anything further? Last call. Okay, thank you. I'll stay there. So if I could direct us to page 6 on diligent, resolutions A through D, just comes with a minor amendment to D in that the delegated authority for minor amendments is now delegated to Kirsty Downey rather than Steph O'Sullivan. So I will move those recommendations. Can someone second me? Marcus? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, that brings SPMP to a conclusion. We're having a morning tea break and then coming back for service delivery.